Rap's a Norse speaker, Edith is an English speaker. What language are they going to talk in the farm? It could get very awkward, to use a Norse term.
And then suppose that Rap and Edith want to buy a horse for their cart. In Old English, cart was wain, from which we get the traditional hay wain.
Rap, who is Norse, who is a husband, that's a Norse word, and his wife Edith, wife being an English word, they have a neighbour, comes from Buckton, and he's English, and he's called Edgar, and he decides to sell Rap a horse. And Edgar comes up to Rap, and he says to him in English, "It's willa they sellan that horse that drageth me no wine." Now Rap, if he was going to say that, would say something rather similar. He would say, "Ek mun selja there, crossit, sem dreger vaugen min." Now, Rap and Edgar have no great problem here on words. Rap says wagen, and Edgar says wine. Rap says cross, and Edgar says horse.
Rap and Edgar's confusion is essentially based on one thing. It's all a question of word endings. Rap says crossit for one horse, but crossin for two horses. Edgar says that horse for one horse, but the horse for the plural.
And it's very striking that what modern English has decided to do about it is to drop the whole problem. Instead of having all this that, the, in, it business, we just say the for everything. We don't attempt to change it at all. And similarly, when it comes to plurals, instead of having a system, as you had in proper Old English, where you said stan, stanas, horse, horse, ship, shipu, boke, beach, we scrap the whole thing and we say stone, stones, horse, horses, ship, ships, book, books.
So when Viking and Saxon met face to face, English achieved the first of its great simplifying compromises. After the expulsion of the Celts, it was one of the most significant steps in the evolution of modern English.
Well, there's an irony in all this, I think, and the irony is this. If you looked round in the year 1000 and said, where are the centres of power for the language, you might say it's in London where the king is, or it's in Winchester where they have the trained scribes and the people writing manuscripts. But actually, the place where the language was developing in the direction that was going to be modern English was places like this. The ancestor of modern English is created in places like Wharfdale.
The power of English to stand up to invasion, war, and social upheaval faced the supreme test in 1066. Harold Godwinson was to be the last English-speaking king for nearly 300 years. The third and most famous invasion in this story began in France. Duke William of Normandy assembled a fleet and launched his forces across the Channel. In the words of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, then William, Earl of Normandy, came to Pevensey.
Daar kom Wilhelm, Earl of Normandy, into Pevensey.
Harold the King gathered then a great army.
Harold the King gathered daar mikkel na here.
William came against him unawares before his people were assembled.
Wilhelm him kom onjäen on unware, his folk gefulked were.
There was slain King Harold and many good men, and the French wielded power over that place of slaughter.
There werd of slacken Harold the King, and fella godra man, andra Frankiskan achton, well stoa je well.
The word castle comes from French, and this was now the language spoken by the Norman knights in their English strongholds. As one chronicler put it, when England fell into Norman hands, they spoke French as they did at home.
Thus komen though Engelande into Normandies hande, and though Normans ne kutha speker though botter ure speche, and speak French as they do at home, and their children did also teach.
William tried to learn English at the age of 43, but was too busy to keep it up. Many Anglo-Norman kings were often totally ignorant of their country's language. Edward III could use English only for swearing. Government, law, and administration were conducted in French, and so was the English Church. In the great cathedrals like Durham, the Normans slowly purged the English-speaking bishops. Next to French, Latin was the language of the clerks and clergy. In the year 1155, the English monks who wrote the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle abandoned their work forever. Going by the written record, English seems to have become obliterated. But some scholars, like Michael Clanchy, challenged the view that Anglo-Norman society was wholly French-speaking.
Scholars have perhaps been misled because we are taught and learn to respect writings, and of course that is what has survived, these masses of writings, whereas speech has been lost.
There's good evidence here, says Clanchy, that the Normans became quickly integrated into English society.
A contemporary of around 1180 says that by that time the Normans and English were so intermarried as to be indistinguishable.
Imagine an Anglo-Norman knight living out in the English countryside, far from the influence of the French-speaking court. He might have married an English wife. Their children would grow up speaking English. Their nursemaids would probably speak English. Out in the fields, his serfs could speak only in English. In the local monastery, the monks would speak English, and so would the humble parish priest. Clanchy can demonstrate, in fact, that by 1250, Anglo-Norman children were learning French like a foreign language.
You can show from 1250, from a knight called Walter of Bibbsworth wrote a book designed for English-speaking people to show them how to speak French. And so French was a language which educated people could speak, but I think it was, by and large, a learned language.
The surviving sermons and prayers show that in some ways English had remained largely unchanged. 100 years before the Norman invasion, the Lord's Prayer sounded like this.
Ure Fader, du de ert on heofanum, si dine name je halgor.
200 years after the invasion, the Lord's Prayer sounded like this.
Ure Fader, that art in heavens, hallowed be thy name.
Clanchy has found startling new evidence that English didn't die out as a written language. This document contains the first known example of written English in a government document after the conquest. In the old script, the word looks like Hamlet, but it's actually nameless, meaning pointless. The French of the castles and the Latin of the churches did not touch the structure of English. But the Normans did have a huge impact on its vocabulary.